said, "You don't want to go to Selma." So I said, "It doesn't matter, I'm going, because I've already committed." But see, to me, I didn't know Selma from Adam's apple. I mean, Selma was like anywhere else. I felt it was all dangerous because of the work people were doing. So Selma being dangerous versus someplace else being dangerous was really insignificant. Um, so Ruby sent this young white man to Penn Station. I met him at Penn Station. We went to Germantown. We picked up this 1938 or 1940 old car full of books that people were donating from that area to the Freedom Schools in Jackson, Mississippi. And so he was going to drive this car down with me in it and drop me off in Atlanta and then proceed on to his destination. In Lexington, Kentucky, he had an accident. The brakes gave out, and we jammed up behind somebody at a stop sign and hit the back of him. So the sheriff comes, takes him to jail, takes me to the jailhouse, but he doesn't put me in a cell because I wasn't driving. So the man asked him, and I'm sorry I don't remember his name, but he said, well, she wasn't driving the car. Can you call somebody or find her a place to stay? So the sheriff called up this black undertaker. He came down, picked me up, took me to this lady's house. She charged me $3 for bread and breakfast, for bed and board for the night. And I stayed there, ate breakfast the next day. Ruby Doris told me, get on a bus. I said, well, what about the guys in jail? She said, you don't know nothing about that. You can't do anything about that. We'll take care of that. You just get on that bus and come on to Atlanta. And I did as I was instructed. So I got to Atlanta near midnight on December 31st, 1964. Got to the SNCC office there. John Love had driven up from Selma, and I got in the car there that night, and we drove directly to Selma, and I became the administrator of the Selma office. It was important to have somebody in the office, not just for administrative purpose, but so people who were working in the field had contact with somebody who was near a phone at all times or two-way radio at all times, because it was dangerous, and people could come up disappearing. But it was dynamic for me because this group of people my spirit had led me to were very good people. They were very strong in their own sense. They didn't have a lot of envy and greed. They were not perfect. None of us are. But they had more good points than a whole lot of people. And they accepted you based upon your skills at that time, because we all have different skills and all have different knowledge. And they didn't judge me. They just say, okay, what can you do? And they put me to doing that. And then I began learning other things. And because Selma was so hot, they were having demonstrations. You had two organizations working there constantly, SCLC and Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And I was very impressed with both organizations because every morning at 7 o'clock, they would have a meeting in our SNCC office because SCLC didn't have an office at that time. So they would meet at the SNCC office. We would go over the day's plans, agendas about where everybody was going to work, what areas you're going to cover, who's going to be working where. And I thought that was so intelligent that these organizations did this, because it would have been so stupid for two organizations in this county to be knocking on the same doors, same days, talking about the same thing. And people would have to ask, well, why don't y'all get together, you know? But that was a lesson for me of organizing. And it was real good in terms of us not stumbling either over each other's feet and looking more like we knew what we were doing maybe than we did. Another thing I learned, though, was that when the leadership would come in for SCLC, the leadership would most of the time had their own agenda, and they didn't pay much attention to their field workers, whereas in SNCC it was just the opposite. The field workers and the people in the projects were a part of the ongoing apparatus of the organization. They weren't just a separate entity with leaders on high telling them what to do. And they had a part in the decision making. And I don't think I could have been in any other kind of organization at all, because it would not have suited me, and I would have not stayed there that long. I learned how to write a press release. I said, I don't know how to write a press release. They said, first paragraph, when, what, where, how, and why, and then tell the story. I said, well, I can do that. So I was writing press releases. Of talking to people from all over the world. Because Selma was so hot, there was so much activity, we had free access to Europe, to Africa, to Asia, to media who wanted us to call them anytime any news broke. That's how hot it was. And there were always reporters in and out of Selma trying to see what was going on. So there was a lot of people that were organizing, a lot of people working very hard. And on one occasion, SNCC and SCLC had been chased out of Selma. I wasn't there on that first time. I don't know how bad it was then. But they decided they had to come back. And both organizations ended up back in Selma and began to work that area again. And they weren't leaving this time. So there was a lot of stimulation there. And the kind of people were coming in to participate, the kind of monies you were getting to help your organization maintain itself. I remember there was one situation where a group of people had spent a lot of time gathering stamps. They used to have S&H green stamps or something, and they bought several vans for us with those stamps, just organizing. And I don't know if those things even exist anymore. But people were very creative about the kind of ways they raised money sometimes. I worked in, when I was working in Selma, I was there about 3 months. I really didn't talk a lot about anything because I really felt I was a student. I didn't have the information, need to keep my big mouth shut and do some learning, and so then that's what I did. And when the Selma to Montgomery demonstration took place, or the Edmund Pettus Bridge crossing, as many people talk about it, SNCC did not want to participate in that. We felt that it was going to be a slaughter, which it was, the first one. And we felt that it had not been organized correctly and that people were not protected, and therefore the police, thank you, and the police were going to really do a job, which is what they did. But the thing we didn't like about it, not so much about that, was that this SCLC people weren't told that this was going to occur. SNCC people weren't told this was going to occur. And it was just announced one day from the church podium. I don't know if it was by Dr. King or whomever, but I call them the high muckamucks ministers. Excuse me, y'all. But mostly male, because who operate in a certain fashion. Like everything is on their agenda time, and their agenda is the only agenda that has any importance. So they didn't even notify or tell the workers so that the workers could come together as a unit to deal with this situation. They just announced it from on high, and therefore it was, and what happened did happen. Then there were 2 more marches. The second one I participated in, just to see how far it would go. The third one I participated in terms of just going to help pick up people who couldn't go the full way, and a lot of SNCC people did that. But that lesson for me was like showing how people appreciate or don't appreciate, how they look down on some people who they think are less than them. And I really resented a lot of ministers, not because of their religion, but because of how they put themselves forward in that situation. Before I left Selma, I wanted to experience a field secretary, Cynthia Washington, who's a SNCC person. She wanted to be a project director in Greene County and start a project up, so they gave her the permission to do that. We found this old house that this 80-year-old black man had built that was like 3 miles into the woods off the main highway, and it had 2 rooms, and there were 5 of us, 3 men, 2 women. So we couldn't put any beds or furniture, so we all had to sleep on the floor. The men dug the trenches out in the back for the bathroom. We had a well in front. Now that's another experience. No insulation on the house, and just very interesting, though. It was like stimulating to me, because I'd never had that kind of experience. And I remember one day we came home, there was a voodoo doll pinned to the outside door of the house. So we like, oh shoot, what's happening here? So then we checked it out. They said, it looked like a friendly voodoo doll. So we went up to look at it, and it had a fro, and it had blue jeans on, coveralls really, and it looked friendly. It had a snake, rattlesnake tail attached to it. So we surmised that people in the community appreciated us being there and were trying to protect us. I remember another occasion when the 3 males had taken the one vehicle we had and had gone into town, into Atlanta, which was about 50 miles away from where we were. And this black man from a nearby farm, he came down with a shotgun, knocked on our door. He said, I'm here to spend the night on your front steps. We said, why? He said, well, you're here alone, and we don't want you. We said, we're all right. He said, you don't know where you are, but I know where you are. I'll be here on your front step until tomorrow morning. And we sat up that night and talked to him, and he just showed us how to use the shotgun and all that kind of stuff, and next morning he left. But another kind of experience showing that there's protection for you. It comes in so many forms. And this was another form because we didn't know, we were too stupid to know we might be in danger, but he knew that we might be in danger, and he moved to make sure that no danger occurred to us. Those kind of experiences showed that it wasn't extraordinary people who were doing anything. It was just regular folks doing all kinds of things. And some did it this way, and some did it that way. And people brought different things to that movement. Some people fed you. Some people never went on a march. A lot of people never went to jail, but sometimes they got you out of jail, or they protected your home or protected your back, this, that, and the other. So it came in so many ways. And I remember the sheriff of Greene County, he told us, you can work in our county long as you want. You can organize all you want. Just don't bring no white people in here to work with you. So they didn't want white people to see white people, black people, Asian people, other people working together, because then that brought an idea into the environment that they didn't want in that environment. And I think that's oftentimes when white people were in marches or demonstrations, they would get beat so bad by the authorities because the authorities were so mad with them for trying to change the status quo, they're going to make a lesson of them. We used to have teenagers, white teenagers, who would come to the office in Selma who wanted to join the movement. And we tell them, hey, you can't join this movement at this time because you're underage, and we could get charged for kidnapping. But what you can do is you can keep those thoughts and keep that concern, and you can start where you are and do what you can. And as you get older, that will grow within you. So you have all kinds of situations occurring. We ended up leaving out of Greene County because the 3 men, recklessly driving the truck, turned it over, demolished the truck. So you can't work no counties on foot. So we had to get up out of there. But I went into Atlanta. One other thing I want to tell you before I leave that part. While I was still at Selma, I got a chance to meet Malcolm. I had seen him in Harlem numerous times because he was always there. He was always speaking on the corners and things, but I never met him. And when we were in Selma, we learned he was going to be a Tuskegee. So our project people said, well, who wants to volunteer to go to Tuskegee and ask Malcolm to come here and speak to the children at Brown's Chapel? So I said, I'll go. And Silas Norman said, I'll go. So the two of us went to Tuskegee to meet Malcolm. We did. When we got there, he was speaking. The auditorium was packed to the rafters, and I'm not even exaggerating. People were on everything that could be sat on or stood on. And he talked for a long while, but then he answered a question and had dialogue twice as long as he spoke, which I was impressed with because so many people speak to you, they hand down the word to you, and then they get on out the door. You can't agree, you can't disagree, you just have to take it and leave it. And so we met with him, and he said he would come the next day to Selma. And he asked us to stay on the campus at the guest house, and we'd all drive back the next day. So we were walking across campus, and I asked him about a lady that I knew was a good friend of his who used to be my roommate in New York. And he said, Vi? He said, yeah. He said, she's doing wonderful, but she needs to be down here with you doing what you're doing. And it made me feel really good because the connotations we had gotten was that Malcolm disrespected what we were doing. He thought that what we were doing was about nothing, that nonviolence was about nothing, etc. You know the kind of terminology. So I was really impressed that he was impressed with our efforts, and it made a difference to me because I had such a dynamic feeling about him, and I thought that he tried to speak the truth, and I think he tried to be an honest person, and I admired that. So I wanted him to admire our efforts. So we talked that evening, like through the evening, and then we finally went to bed. We drove to Selma the next day. He rode with a lady friend of his who had a little car about this big. Malcolm was about this tall, all right? It had this little red convertible. So we pulled up in front of the church in his car, and Silas and I in the SNCC car. And he unfolds his body from this little car and stands up, this giant of a man in Selma, looking like something totally outside of Selma's existence. Long black coat and that little fur hat he used to wear. So they were like I told you, a lot of reporters in Selma all the time because we were sleeping in the streets sometimes, and sometimes we just refused to to break our marches down, we just say we're going to stay right here until we're allowed to go further. So the reporters, a group of them were across the street. They saw this man get out the car, and you knew immediately. They recognized him, but they didn't recognize him. You know, it's like you see the postman outside the uniform, or see Malcolm outside New York. They knew it was somebody important. They knew it was somebody sharp. They knew it was somebody dynamic, but they couldn't figure out who it was. And we said, let's hurry up and get inside the church before they remember. As soon as we got in the church, they came running across the street, banging on the door. It's Malcolm, it's Malcolm. We said, hey, we're going to let you talk to Malcolm, but it'll be later. So we, SCLC almost had a heart attack because we had brought Malcolm there. Andy Young was there, and Abernathy, a whole lot of folks were there. So they wanted to have a meeting before we let Malcolm into the podium to speak at the church. So they told me, they said, well, you don't need to come in. I say, there will be no meeting if I'm not in there, okay? Because they had this male thing, these preachers, they love to have talks among themselves. And a female is just like an anomaly. But my thing is, so be it, okay? I'm going to be there. So they talked to Malcolm about not speaking. They said, don't start no trouble. The man was only going to be there one half, like a few hours. He wasn't going to start the revolution in Selma, Alabama in 2 or 3 hours. So it was really telling. So we're coming out of the back after the meeting, and I said, how do you feel about what they were just saying? He said, don't worry about it. Nobody puts words in my mouth. And we proceeded on, put that aside. And he spoke to the children, because every morning, Willie Ricks and some other folks from SNCC would have these rallies before the kids went to school, and the church would be full of school children. The church had gotten so full of children that we had to move the adults to another church down the street to have meetings and rallies sometimes, but the kids were there. And it was very interesting. Reporters had lined, because they had gotten in, of course, and they lined the front row, and they were sitting on the floor in the front pew, and the rest of them were children. And most of these children had never heard of Malcolm, but they listened intently. And I remember the reporters turning red and looking uncomfortable because of what he was saying about some of the environments that we were dealing with. And it turned out well, and then he did an interview, and then he left on out of town. So we took him to the airport, Silas and I. So he said, because he had broken away from Elijah Muhammad, and he had his own organization. And he said, now, if I come south with my organization, would SNCC work with us? I said, I don't know about SNCC, but I will. But we told him that we thought SNCC would, and that we would carry his message to SNCC. And if he came this way, he would be sure that we would cooperate with him to assist in getting the job done in the South. And once again, I was impressed with that because, like I said before, I thought his thoughts about us and what we were doing was just all downhill in a negative, and it really wasn't. So a lot of times things that you're hearing from other people are not necessarily true. You have to check it out yourself. When he left that airport, I think he was dead about a month or 2 after that. So that ended that little dream and that little effort. But having known this man, it was so intelligent. It was just, but I wouldn't have met Malcolm in that fashion. I could have met him on the street, say, hi, Mr. Malcolm, how you doing? It's nice to meet you. I'd like to tell him. That would have been it. But I could not have met him in the context I met him in unless I had been involved in the movement, unless I had been involved in struggle. I couldn't have met him sitting at home. I could have met him hanging out with my friends. I could have met any of those people in SNCC that are still part of my life by not doing anything. So by stretching out and following my spirit and allowing it to sometimes guide me, allowed me to expand my vision, has allowed me to expand my life. And did I know 35 years ago I'd be here talking to you today? The thought was never even a concept. You don't know what you will do until you do something. So it's been a good life for me. Being in SNCC, working in Atlanta, being involved in movements with people, going into small communities, seeing the strength of regular people, and especially women. And it's not to put men down, but you never got pictures of women. You got an exception, like a Harriet Tubman or a so-and-so or so-and-so, but you never got the impression that women were so strong And there was no community that I worked in or people that we worked with where women didn't rise to the occasion. They rose like cream to the top. It was always amazing, how the strength. And so it really discourages me when we don't take advantage of the strength of women, because we don't know what we're missing. I really think that. It's hard for me to talk a long time. As a result of my involvement with the movement and the connections, there are other things that have grown from that over the years, and I still, as Vincent said, I still consider myself a movement person. The movement in the form we know and speak of no longer exists, but there are many, many movements going on that I think people need to participate in and be aware of and be conscious of. And we're not going to all do the same things. We're not going to all have the same interests. But there are many things we can do that will assist and support the other situations. And a lot of us are not doing that. But I'm still involved. There's nothing I can do that doesn't involve me some kind of way or some kind of organized effort. I learned that you can't do anything by yourself. You can have good thoughts. You can write good books. But in terms of organizing, you have to be involved with other people. You have to learn to work together. And I've had situations where people say, well, if we had an all-women's movement, or we had all black, or we had all this or all that. My thing is, no matter what you have, you're going to have to struggle in it. In SNCC, we used to struggle in those meetings. But we came out of them and we worked together. It didn't stymie us. It didn't stop us. We felt that that was normal and natural. Human beings argue. Human beings disagree. Human beings have conflict. But how do you have all these things go on and still get the job done? We didn't have, and we refused to have, a leader. Yes, John Lewis was our chairperson, but he's not our leader. Stokely was our chairperson. He's not our leader. H. Rap Brown was our chairperson. He's not our leader. These are people who cooperate with us as an organizational system, but we all have sense. We all have ideas, and no one person has it all. And many of us learn to deal with it like that. And the media found it real hard to understand, and we tell them sometimes, well, we don't have that kind of leader. You can't go to one person and get anything about all of what we do. You have to go to many people. You have to go to different projects, because each project was different. Each situation was dealing with each city or each town was dealing with a different sheriff, a different method of violence, a different, could be Klan, it could be something else, non-name, but the forces were against you. It was very dangerous. And people would say, well, weren't you afraid? Well, not really, because I knew I was going into a war zone when I went. So I went in knowing something might occur, but my spirit said, don't worry about it, it's not going to happen. So I went on ahead. And because I really believe that you have inner guides that if you listen to them, can direct you, can help you make your decisions about what's right for you. And nobody else can see that but you. So you have to make a decision. If I lie or do some really ugly kinds of things, I can do them and get away with them, but I will know I've done them. And nobody else is going to judge me for them because they may not know it. But I have to judge me. So I take no credit per se for Fay as Fay alone, the powerful, the omnipotent, none of that. I'm a human being, and I have many of the things, visceral things move me that move any of us. But I just try to listen to some of them because those things make me feel negative. And I'll give you an example. As a child who's been molested, I think that molestation, and we see it all the time, brings very ugly thoughts to the person who's been molested. And I've had ugly thoughts, but I know where they come from. I know that they're not me. They don't feel like me. And so I say to myself, I don't let an idiot, an ignorant person who had the audacity to molest me, have any direction in my life. I will not let that occur. And I don't. And so I fight the ugly thoughts that are in me. Now, they might be there otherwise. I don't know. But I know as a result of, there's some things that have come to me that I don't think I would have thought if these other things had not occurred. So I had to be on guard for that situation. And I'm still on guard. The thing I like about being in the movement in terms of now, the experiences didn't just stop when the movement, quote unquote, came to an end. Bernice Regan came to me one time. She said, Fay, Guy Carawan, who was at Highlander, are you familiar with Highlander Education Research Center in Highlander, Tennessee? In the 60s, they used to have the billboards up on the highways, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. Dr. King sitting in his classroom, and they said it was this communist school. It wasn't communist. It was put together by Horton, Miles Horton, and some folks who were concerned about humanity and life and living. And all kinds of people from all over the world, including this country, would go there and have classes and conferences and dialogue like we're having here, trying to understand concepts, trying to understand difficult things, trying to find solutions. But he was there, and it was a communist school. But it wasn't communist. It was about righteousness. It was about people being right and being concerned and being empowered and learning that you are not helpless. You can make a difference. You can make a change. You are powerful. And that's, to me, what it's been about. So Bernie said, now Guy has, and some other people have researched, and they found out that the We Shall Overcome Fund hasn't been copyrighted, and that they copyrighted it. So she said, Guy said, though, it wouldn't be correct for them to take the money that comes from the royalties. So what we decided to do was set up a fund. We called it We Shall Overcome Fund. She said, would you be a part of the fund? So this is like 25 years ago. So yeah, we'll set it up. So we take the royalties from that. We put it in a investment fund, and then we give out grants of $2,000. We started out at $500. Now we give out grants of $2,000 for community organizations who are using song for struggle, for organizing purposes, for teaching how to use songs in struggle, and then how to manifest itself. And so we give grants for that with that money. We don't take that money. They didn't take that money. We try to give that money back because it's not ours. But I wouldn't have known to do that. I wouldn't have had the opportunity if I had not stepped on out there and done some other things. When we started the National Anti-Klan Network, we started because the shooting that took place in North Carolina, where the Klan shot up Nelson Johnson and some other folks who were having a peaceful, nonviolent demonstration, and they were attacked, and several people were shot, and I think one person was killed. Was it? 4 people? 4 people were killed. And there was a big demonstration. A lot of people came from a lot of places to show that they were really not going to tolerate this kind of behavior. And as a result, Ann Braden and Leah Wise and numerous other people, we had a meeting after the march, and we decided we needed to create an organization to manifest itself to deal with information and news so people could always be aware of what was happening with these hate groups. And the National Anti-Klan Network was born, which is now called the Center for Democratic Renewal, still based in Atlanta. But I couldn't have done that if I had not joined the movement. So I don't see it as Fay Bellamy Powell separate from any of these things. I see myself as a part of the whole. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, as you can tell, Sister Fay is yours. And now, be with her as one of yours, not as some special person up there, but as your sister who wants to engage with you in dialogue now. We'll
Yes,
start it, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll go on some more. Go ahead, please. For those of you who haven't been here before, we are always using a microphone for those who want to ask questions or make comments. The microphone is not to throw your voice in here, it's to make sure that it gets on the tape.
Right.
So you use